Hey guys, this is James.
And this is Denny, and we are here answering our second, installation of our Q&A series, where we're going to be talking about your questions that you guys had asked about pu'ers. So This won't be, I think we're planning on doing a special episode about raw and ripe pu'ers individually, and we'll be releasing that sometime in the next few months. But we'll do a basic primer and answer your questions first. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. James, what are we brewing?
Yeah, so this is the Shunpin Chawang. It's from a upcoming episode, I think 167, something like that. So it's a nice premium one. It goes on for a while, so we're gonna keep drinking it. This is steep number 8 or something already.
Yeah,
so
it's got. It's great.
It's got some legs.
Some legs. I'm feeling it. Okay, so first question here from Russell H. I
love Russell H. Actually, I don't know who that is.
We let the trolling begin. The trolling goes both ways, people. So, why are my ripe pu'ers not as complex or have as much taste as when I first purchased them? He goes on to say, I generally brew 8 to 10 grams in a 150 milliliter Yixing clay teapot, boiling, couple rinses, and then 15 seconds steeping, first couple, and then extend as time goes. I keep my pu'er in an original wrapper in the cardboard box. I generally chip off 50 grams or so per week and keep this in a Ziploc bag. Maybe I'm getting used to the taste, but when I first tasted the tea, the taste would linger in my throat, and that was for quite a while after drinking. So, I'll go ahead and take a stab at this one.
Yeah, do it.
So, I think that storing a small amount of the tea versus keeping all the tea together will have somewhat of an impact. My guess is that the tea is probably gonna persevere through a week of being chipped off by itself, and you're probably just used to it. It will be impacted by how you store it, and if you're storing it in an area with a ton of air movement and all of that stuff, it's just gonna naturally just kind of pull off a lot of the aromas, and some of the moisture will evaporate, etc. So it will affect the tea, but most likely you're probably used to the tea at this point, especially if you have a large amount of it. And that's not a bad thing, but maybe what you do is, instead of doing it Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, maybe you do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and you add a different tea on Tuesday and Thursday. That'd be my advice. What about you, James?
I think Denny just gave pretty solid advice in general, and I would just echo the airflow comment. I think one piece of misinformation that gets spread a lot in the West is that airflow is necessary or good for pu'ers, but really in the West, most of the West, unless you live in Florida, it's going to dissipate the aroma and potentially dry your tea out significantly. So tea flattening out or thinning out because you leave it in too dry of conditions with too much airflow is certainly a possibility.
So, and that's a good segue. Let me try to load up that next question, but we have a question about, and we're going to kind of skip over the place a little bit here, folks, but there was a question here about James's pu'er fridge.
All right.
Here we go, from Philip Abba. We are staying busy. Storing pu'er in a fridge. This is really new to me. I'm aware of the fact that the pu'er needs a certain humid climate, and blah, blah, but isn't a fridge too cold?
A plugged-in fridge is too cold, but my fridge is definitely not plugged in.
Right.
So, do not plug your fridge in if you use that storage method. Do not plug that wine cooler in if you do that. Cut the cords. Tell your mom, we'll cut the cords so your mom can't plug in the fridge. Do not plug in that fridge. You do not want your tea that cold. I don't know what the cold would do. It probably would just freeze it. It would probably just, who knows? I don't know what polar bear pu'er would taste like. But the natural place where pu'er has been stored, has the longest track history of being stored, is places like Hong Kong, Southeast Asia, places like that, where it is certainly not fridge temperatures. So the fridge is unplugged. It's more a way to have a very contained area, somewhat sealed, where you're to reduce the airflow of the tea, and just so you can control the climates of it a little bit better.
Yeah, 100%. So James's fridge is not plugged in. You'll know if you're like, going to college and then you have a summer break. You keep your fridge ajar a little bit, or else it's going to grow some stuff in there. James is definitely growing some stuff in there, and it's called raw pu'er. We have another question here going on about from Quick Quips. Interesting.
Quips?
Quick Quips asks, what are good value raw pu'ers to get now for long-term storage? Which eBay retailers are reliable?
Why don't you, do you have a raw pu'er that you particularly like?
Well, so, I don't actually, for long-term storage, no, I don't. I'm not in the business of holding on to raw. I tend to just drink my tea. So for a young pu'er, which I'm going to be far more familiar with, one of my favorites has been the pound cake. I love it. It's light, it's floral, it's creamy, it's fresh. It's just always really good. So I really enjoy that. What about you, James? Is there a tea? I think what he's getting at is, are there teas that are going to reliably get better over time? Do we know about them today? Have there been a few in the last couple of years that are clear picks for storage? First part of the question.
Well, I would say that you could do you could buy some teas from Scott. It depends what budget range means, of course. Mm-hmm. But Scott has a number of affordable options. White Tea has some affordable options as well.
So Scott from Yunnan Sourcing.
But if you really want the surest bet of something that will age, what I would personally do is not buy young tea, because the tea and the processing flaws, and you're not exactly sure how it's going to develop when it's young. So I tend to buy most of my teas that are at least 6 or 7 years old, before the price has shot significantly up, but where you can sort of chalk it up to being safe in the aging categories. Because you could buy very expensive tea, and if it's not treated well, or if it's not processed properly, that expensive tea could taste very bad in 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, great point. So hedge your bets and wait a little bit of time to make sure something has sort of been proven and seasoned, more or less. I think the other thing, too, just keep in mind for you folks out there, pu'er tends to increase in price per year by about 10 to 15%, 5 to 15, but more likely 10. So you can expect to pay 60, 70% more for the strategy that James is recommending, but he's hedging that 60% on the fact that tea is going to get a lot better later, and it's not worth the initial investment if the tea ends up being crap after 6 years in the first place. So what about eBay retailers? I'll shoot first. All tea seems to be great. I don't really
Taobao.
I'm sorry, that's Taobao.
Yes.
Dang it, they're the same thing.
So, but
okay.
I think you make a good point.
Yeah, so you can for if you're looking for something that's budget, that's coming sort of from China, which is kind of what the eBay thing goes for, I think, then Alti would be a good option there.
And I think it is no secret that a lot of those eBay vendors are simply resellers that buy from places like Taobao or real life people, but I think you would be surprised at the amount of tea that is bought from Taobao and then is resold at eBay, which basically means you're getting another middleman. Right. So I don't personally buy from eBay vendors. I don't know who I would recommend, but as Denny said, alti.taobao is a good Taobao vendor. There are a couple other good Taobao vendors that I know resell and whose teas are resold on eBay. mx-t.taobao is one that sells a bunch of factory teas, if that's what you're interested in. But I personally do not buy from eBay.
Another question here from Tim Lane. What makes a pu'er earthy tasting, I think, in its fermentation? What makes it taste less earthy? Thanks.
So, good question. I think it depends if you're talking about raw or ripe pu'er. Why don't I answer it for raw and you could answer it for ripe? Sure. So raw, I think probably the easiest way for a pu'er to get very earthy is for it to be old, and A, to be old, and B, aged in somewhere where there's a pretty decent humidity and temperature. Hong Kong traditional storage will definitely push your tea in that sort of earthy direction, or can push your tea in that earthy sort of direction. If you stored tea for 25 years in Seattle, I'm not even sure if it would be that earthy, at least compared to maybe something that's even been traditionally stored for 7 or 8 years in Hong Kong. So definitely the storage makes some sort of difference. How about for ripe?
I think the same thing would be true for ripe pu'er. So if you're going to have a humid, it's basically just a byproduct of the microbial activity. So the more stuff is happening in there, the more you're going to taste that stuff. That being said, I think the earthiness of tea does not come as much from the fermentation and the processing as it does, and it does come from that, but as much as it comes from the base material and the blend or source of the tea. So you're not gonna, in the same way that certain wine regions have earthier notes and certain wine regions have more crisp notes, but you can still make a crisp wine from an earthy region. It's the same case with pu'er, but more, I think the biggest contributing factor for the earthiness is going to just be the actual base material.
Mm-hmm. And ripe pu'er, of course, will tend to bring out those flavors or simulate that process a little bit quicker.
More quickly.
Yeah.
Still going strong.
Indeed.
It has, the texture of this has leveled up a little bit though. It's not quite as thick and viscous.
Yeah, a little bit more florals now.
Let's see, what else we got going on? Bear with me, y'all.
Might be a couple questions on the site as well.
Okay, to check this out. Let's see.
Alvin had a question, didn't you?
How much time do you think? So, Alvaro asks, how much time do you think a pu'er tea in the original wrapper in a drawer? Let's see. How do I rephrase this? How long would a pu'er tea maintain its aroma and flavor if it's left in the original wrapper in a drawer that's in a dry environment? I think that's kind of what the question is asking.
So I would ask you, Denny, how did the pound cake? Did you notice any discernible difference in like aroma? Did it change, or how were you storing it?
Dude, I drank that so quickly that it did not change. So honestly, it's really a byproduct of, I think it matters more and more the longer you have the tea, right? So it's just a function of storage. The effect of storage is a function of time, and if you're drinking tea quickly, storage is not going to have as much of an impact.
Yep.
But if you're going to hold on to tea for 10 years, or you're buying a tea that's 10 years old, you need to know about the storage, and you need to be careful about how you store your tea. Yep. So, James, why don't you speak a little bit more to that while I let up?
And I think there's a lot of factors to this. When the temperature is hot, then it will either pick up humidity faster, or it will dry out faster too. So if you are in 90 degrees, if let's say you're in Las Vegas, it's 110 degrees, and it's 10% relative humidity, right, which may actually be high. I don't know. So it's very dry. That will dry your tea out very fast. On the other hand, if the tea is heavily compressed, that's going to limit the speed of changes, either to pick up humidity or to dry out. So a tea that would be like iron pressed or whatever, like a shagwan or something, that would be slower to pick up changes from the environment, whether it's humid or not humid.
Totally, yeah. I mean, definitely the amount of pressure that has been subjected to the tea, also the amount of tea that you have too. So if you're if you were to have a huge cake and then break apart the center of it, hypothetically that center is going to be a more humid environment than the outside of the cake.
Yep.
Okay. Let's see. Let's push about Yansha. Let's see.
Any pu'er questions?
Yeah. Okay, here's a fun one. How do you get the tea label off of the cake for pu'er?
Oh, you mean like the nafe?
Yeah, exactly, literally. The nafe. So Fiona asks, how do you get the nafe off of the pu'er? Every cake I have a lot of tea covering it on both sides. I've been prying the tea off the label on the top, but I always tear up the paper and get paper chunks on my tea.
Do you want to tackle that?
Usually it's going to be like the wrapper and then like a solid inch circle around all sides. It's going to be basically just like have some cellulose on it. And if I have a lot of the tea or if I don't really care about it, I usually just toss that. I'm not dealing with such high quality teas on a regular basis that I have to worry about that. So I'm not the best person to answer that. James would be better.
Wait, so what's the question exactly?
The question is basically just how do you handle getting the Neife off of the tea successfully?
I just drink around it and then pull it off.
Yeah.
That's pretty much it.
Yeah.
Simple answer.
there's more or less. Okay. Bemused caffeined. I like that, like a fiend, but caffeined. Asks. I'm really interested in aging raw pu'er for long-term storage to see how it develops. There are so many options, too many, even when narrowing it down to those that have sample sizes. I'd rather not waste money making bad decisions. Same. Do you have any suggestions as to old, ancient, wild arbor, spring, fall, harvest, large factory versus smaller operations? So, like everything. I'd rather spend the money for a few really good ones rather than a large collection of uninteresting mediocrity. Thanks. And then she also mentions that, or she or he, excuse me, also mentions that she's posting a link to our Pu'erh compendium that James did.
Okay.
So, but that being said, James.
Okay. Well, I gave some advice earlier on what I personally look for. So, I tend to look, especially if I'm buying in some sort of quantity, which is usually what you want to do if you're buying to age. So that way you have plenty of it when it's 20 years old or 30 years old. Large or small, that will depend. You can find, I guess if you're looking for higher end stuff, small could be better. But places like Dai or Shaguan also do make special productions. I have more experience going for smaller stuff, so boutique labels such as Yongqing Hao, for longer term storage. What else was there in there?
Wild Arbor.
I ignore that. I just focus mainly on the qualities of the tea. You can't really trust everything that says, so you shouldn't be being like, oh, this place has 500-year-old trees versus 400-year-old trees. Therefore, I will buy the 500-year-old trees. I don't like that particular brand of logic.
Yeah. And just to piggyback off of that, how old a tea plant is doesn't have any... It may or may not have an impact on the taste, but the taste is what's the most important.
Yep.
So if it helps, great, but the outcome you're looking for is to have a great tasting tea.
Yep.
And it doesn't seem to have a huge impact. So, and there's also just, I think there's a credibility aspect with, especially with aging raw pu'er, about these sorts of things that it just does seem to be hard to overcome. So, and I would give the same advice too.
Yep.
Have something that you've enjoyed. You know you're gonna like it. You know it's old and it's not gonna go bad. And then buy a bunch of it. Buy as much as you want.
And make sure you have your storage figured out too, because like if you are planning on either aging to sell it again or aging to just drink it, you need to make sure, because no one's going to want it if you age your tea poorly, and it doesn't taste like anything in 20 years or whatever. It's a waste of time, it's a waste of money, so you really need to make sure that you have some sort of solution that you are confident with, especially if you're going to drop a large chunk of cash on it.
Yeah, totally. Final thoughts on this tea? This is probably steeping 15?
Yeah, so this is the second part of our episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's chunking along. My throat has lots of sweet feelings. The energy, you guys might be able to tell in this episode, but we are feeling the tea energy for this Shun Pin Chao Wang. I feel like I don't know what I feel like, but I feel good.
I feel great. I'm about to run out and jump out of a window.
And then he's gonna walk a dog.
And then I'm gonna go walk a dog. It's true, actually. This tea has, I think, lost some of the intensity, but has gotten a lot sweeter. The sweet notes have sort of just developed and gotten more obvious. Yeah, really, really lovely tea. This has been Q&A number 2. We've done this about raw and ripe pu'er. I think we'll keep on doing these because they're fun. So if you folks want to post up more questions below, if you have questions specifically, our next episode will be about just other teas besides raw and ripe pu'er, basically.
So it'll be tea focused. So the first one was a little bit more focused generally.
Right.
This one's pu'er focused. It will be tea focused, but not on pu'er.
Yep.
So do not ask pu'er questions. Well, we might get to those eventually, but ask questions about other teas. Any questions are welcome.
Cool. And stay tuned. So check us out on TeaDB.org. Instagram is cool. Follow us there. Use the heart button. Like us. Like the video if you like the video. And
I'm giving all the
good.
The
if
like
you're not doing it,
symbols
at
and
least
stuff.
James is.
Yeah. Oh, I made 20 accounts and I like this 20 times. Every time. Oh shit.
We'll see you guys next time.
Cheers.